Imagine being trapped in a Roman cell, cold, damp, dark. The smell of mold fills your lungs with every breath. You are chained, not knowing if you will see the sun tomorrow. At any moment, soldiers could drag you away to be executed. At this very moment, as you fight against the bone-chilling cold, you pick up a pen and paper, and she begins to write about joy. It sounds crazy, doesn't it? But that's exactly what the Apostle Paul did. And here's the question that will haunt you for the next few minutes. How can someone maintain joy when they lose absolutely everything? More importantly, why do so many Christians today give up on their faith when they face far less than Paul faced? This is not a rhetorical question. It's a question that may be burning inside you right now. Maybe you're watching this video because you've felt like giving up. Maybe you've already given up. Or maybe you know someone who abandoned their faith and you don't understand why. Stay with me until the end of this video, because I'm going to show you something that will completely change your perspective on faith, suffering, and perseverance. It's not what you expect. It's not another motivational speech saying be strong or pray more. It's something much deeper and, honestly, much more disturbing. Because the truth is this, there is a fatal mistake that 90% of Christians make without realizing it. A mistake so subtle, so culturally accepted, that it seems normal. But it is precisely this mistake that is destroying your ability to persevere. It is this mistake that is making you or people around you consider giving up everything. And here's the most shocking part. This mistake has nothing to do with a lack of prayer, a lack of Bible reading, or a lack of fellowship. In fact, you can be doing all of those things religiously and still make this devastating mistake. Paul knew something we've forgotten, something that kept him strong when everything fell apart, when his freedom was taken away, when his health deteriorated, when his friends abandoned him, when death drew near. But before I reveal what that something was, I need to show you the magnitude of the problem. Because if you don't understand the depth of the crisis, you won't appreciate the solution. Think about it. How many people do you know who were once fervent in their faith and are now distant from it? How many young people grew up in the church and now want to distance themselves from Christianity? How many couples who served together are now separated, bitter, and disillusioned with God? The numbers are alarming, and the response the church usually gives is always the same. They weren't truly converted, or they lacked commitment. But what if the problem is deeper? What if there's a structural flaw in how we understand the gospel itself? Paul was not the only apostle to end his life in extreme suffering. Consider this: John, the beloved disciple, the one who literally rested his head on Jesus' chest, ended his days exiled on the island of Patmos. Peter was crucified upside down. James was beheaded. All the apostles, without exception, faced persecution, imprisonment, torture, or death. Now answer me this: if truly following Jesus led the apostles to those tragic ends, why do you expect your faith to lead you to a comfortable, prosperous, and trouble-free life? This question is uncomfortable. I know that, but it's necessary, because somewhere in history, Christianity became synonymous with blessed life, and blessed life became synonymous with health, money, perfect marriage, obedient children, and a successful career. And when these things don't happen, when illness strikes, when money runs out, when marriage fails, when children rebel, when a career crumbles, our faith crumbles along with it. Here is the first clue to what Paul discovered. He wasn't trying to live a good life through God. He had found a good God who was life itself. It may seem the same, but it's not. The difference between these two phrases is the difference between persevering with joy like Paul or giving up in frustration like so many today. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what that difference is. I'm going to show you how Paul was able to write "Rejoice in the Lord always." Again, I say rejoice while he was a week away from being beheaded. But more importantly, I'm going to show you how you can have that same strength, that same peace, that same inexplicable joy, even when everything around you is falling apart. Because by the end of this video, you will have a clear choice. You can continue down the path that 90% of Christians are on, a path that inevitably leads to frustration and abandonment. Or you can choose the path that Paul chose, the less comfortable path. The path that is harder to explain to friends and family, but the only path that truly works. So the question isn't whether you want an easy life. The question is, do you want a faith that survives when life gets tough? If the answer is yes, stay with me, because what I'm going to show you isn't in popular sermons. It's not in Christian self-help books. But it is in the letters of a man who went all the way and ended by saying, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Let's find out how he did it, and how you can do it too. Now I'm going to tell you something that might sound like heresy at first glance. But pay close attention, because this will explain why you might be one step away from giving up without even realizing it. You are living under a lie disguised as faith. Let me explain before you close the video. There's a mental model that we all absorb from childhood. A model so ingrained that you don't even question it anymore. It goes like this. If I do A, I'll achieve B. If I study, I'll pass. If I work hard, I'll prosper. If I'm kind, people will treat me well. That makes sense, right? It's logical, it's linear, it's predictable. Now, without realizing it, you've brought that same model into your faith. If I pray, God will answer me. If I tithe, I will be financially blessed. If I am faithful, my marriage will be happy. If I raise my children in the gospel, they will not stray. It seems reasonable, doesn't it? It even sounds biblical. Honor your father and mother so that your days may be long. Give, and it will be given to you. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. But here's the problem, and this is the fatal flaw. I promise to reveal. You've turned the gospel into a business transaction. You didn't realize it, but that's exactly what you did. You're negotiating with God. I give you my obedience, you give me a good life. It's a transaction, a contract. If I fulfill my part, God has to fulfill his. And when God doesn't fulfill his promises, or rather, when things don't happen as you expected, you have three options. First, doubt yourself. Didn't I pray enough? Do I have hidden sins? Second, doubt God. Is God really good? Does he care? Third, doubt Christianity itself. Is all this just an illusion? But wait, I haven't told you the most disturbing part yet. Because this mental model you're using, I'll give it a name. The law of linearity isn't just ineffective, it's destructive. Want to see how? Think of someone you know who is genuinely devout. Someone who truly prays, reads the Bible, serves in church, helps those in need. Now imagine that person receiving a terminal cancer diagnosis, or losing a child in an accident, or being betrayed by their spouse. The law of linearity states that this shouldn't happen. A person did A, was faithful, so they should receive B, protection, blessing, a good life. When B doesn't happen, the entire system collapses. And before you say, but that's prosperity theology, let me interrupt you. Prosperity theology is simply the explicit version of what you implicitly practice. You may not believe that God will make you rich, but you believe that God will protect you from tragedies if you are faithful. You may not expect a perfect marriage, but you expect it to be at least minimally functional if you both love Jesus. You may not want wealth, but you expect comfortable provision. And here's something you don't know yet, but are about to find out. Paul knew about this mistake, he confronted it, and he found the solution. But the solution isn't what you think. It's not have more faith or trust God more or accept God's will. Those are religious answers to a problem that goes much deeper. The solution that Paul found is so radical, so counterintuitive, so opposed to what our culture and even our Christian culture teaches us, that when I tell you about it, you may initially reject it. But before we get there, I need to show you something about Paul that most Christians ignore. Something that is clearly written in Scripture, but that we simply don't process because it doesn't fit the narrative we want to believe. Paul wrote 13 books of the New Testament. He founded dozens of churches. He suffered shipwrecks, was stoned, beaten, and imprisoned multiple times. He was the greatest missionary in the history of Christianity. And how did his life end? Alone. Abandoned by friends. Imprisoned in a filthy cell in Rome. Awaiting execution. Without a lawyer, without visitors, without comfort. In one of his last letters, he writes, "At my first offense, no one showed up to support me. Everyone abandoned me." Now tell me, does this sound like the blessed life they preach in churches? But here's what's absolutely disturbing. In that same letter, Paul says that he has everything he needs. How can a man who has literally lost everything say that he has everything? The answer lies in something Paul discovered. Something that freed him from the law of linearity. Something I call the law of freedom. But before explaining what this law of freedom is, I need to ask you an honest question. And I want you to answer it mentally, without guilt, without trying to give the right answer. What do you really want? A good life or a good God? Think carefully before answering, because the automatic response is a good God, of course. But is that really true? If God were to tell you right now, you can have perfect health, financial prosperity, a happy marriage, obedient children, and a long life, but without my presence, or you can have my presence, but with suffering, losses, trials, and a difficult life, what would you choose? The honest answer for most people is, I want both. I want God and the good life. But Paul discovered something shocking. You can only have one real one. And which one you choose will determine whether you persevere or give up. Now, before I show you how Paul made that choice and how it set him free, I need to warn you about something. What comes next will disturb you. It will be unsettling because it goes against everything you've heard in motivational sermons. It goes against the idea that God wants to give you the best. It goes against the narrative that your dreams are about to come true. But if you're tired of superficial answers, if you're exhausted by formulas that don't work, if you want a faith that truly survives life's storms, so stay with me, because now I'm going to show you exactly how Paul broke the chains of the law of linearity and entered the law of freedom, and you can do it too, today. Have you ever wondered why some people manage to smile amidst chaos while others crumble at the first setback? It's not willpower, it's not personality, and it certainly isn't because their lives are easier. The difference lies in a simple equation that defines your entire life experience. And now I'm going to show you that equation. Majority equation. If I do A, then I get B, good life in this equation. Jesus is the means to achieve B. You accept Jesus, A, to have a transformed, happy, blessed life, B. God is the tool, the good life is the goal. Now pay attention, because here is Paul's equation, and it's completely different. Paul's equation, if I give up B, then I receive a good God in this equation. Jesus is not the means, Jesus is the end. He is not the strategy to achieve something better. He is the something better. Okay, I understand the theory. You might be thinking, but how does it work in practice? I'll give you a real example. Imagine a Christian woman, faithful and dedicated. She has been praying for marriage for years. She remains pure, serves in the church, and trusts in God. She is doing a faithfulness while hoping for B marriage. 10 years pass? 15 years? 20 years? The wedding never happens. According to the law of linearity, there are only two possible conclusions. Either God failed or she failed. Either way, the system breaks down. Frustration sets in, faith wavers. But by the law of liberty, the question changes completely. It's not why isn't God giving me what I promised? It's, is Jesus sufficient for me, even without marriage? Do you see the difference? In the first question, God owes you something. In the second, God is something to you. But let's escalate this. Because if it were just about marriage or jobs or health, it would be relatively simple. The problem is that the stakes are much higher. Let me tell you about John. Not just any John. John, the beloved disciple. This man had a relationship with Jesus that none of us will ever have. He literally rested his head on Jesus' chest. He heard the heartbeat of God incarnate. Jesus, from the cross, entrusted his own mother to John's care. If anyone deserved a blessed life, it was John, right? So how did John end his days? Exiled on a deserted island, probably working in Roman mines, without any of the earthly promises you think God guarantees to the faithful. Now, the pressure is mounting. Because if Joel met this end, what does that say about his expectations? But wait, before you have an existential panic, let me give you a reward right now. A truth that will bring you momentary relief before I increase the pressure again. John's revelation on Patmos. While John was in exile, isolated from everything and everyone, something extraordinary happened. Jesus appeared to him. And in that encounter, John received the revelation of the apocalypse, the revelation of the end of history, of Christ's final triumph, of the new creation. John received no ransom from prison. He received no physical comfort. He received no material reward. John received God himself. And here's the relief. When you stop demanding from God the life you want, you are finally free to receive the God you need. But now I need to increase the pressure again, because there's an even deeper level to all of this, a level that most people don't want to face. The problem isn't just that you want the good life. The problem is that the good life has become your idol. And here's the definition of an idol that you need to remember. An idol is anything good that you transform into something definitive. Marriage is good, but when it becomes the condition for your happiness, it's an idol. Health is good, but when it becomes the condition for your peace, it's an idol. Prosperity is good, but when it becomes the condition for your security, it's an idol. And here's what's frightening. You can worship idols using the language of faith. God, I trust in your timing to grant me marriage. Translation, God, you have to give me a marriage eventually. God, I know you will provide. Translation, God, you have to give me material comfort. We're now at the top of the climb, and here's the question you need to answer with brutal honesty. If God never gives you what you're asking for, will he still be enough? Not theoretically, practically. If marriage never happens, if healing never occurs, if financial provision is always tight, if your children never return to the faith, if you die without seeing your prayers answered the way you hoped, will Jesus still be enough? Because here is the truth that nobody wants to hear. Paul was beheaded. John died in exile. Peter was crucified. James was stoned. Stephen was martyred. All the apostles, all the early Christians, practically all of them, paid a very high price for following Jesus. And none of them gave up. Why? Because they weren't following Jesus to get a good life. They had found life itself in Jesus. And here's the reward you've been waiting for. The answer to all this drama. When you relinquish your right to a good life, you paradoxically experience a fuller life than you ever imagined. Paul says, I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am in. Content in prison, content in shipwreck, content in solitude, content in pain. How? Because he had Christ, and Christ was enough. This is the law of freedom. You are free from circumstances because you no longer depend on them to be complete. Do you still want good things? Of course. Do you still pray for blessings? Yes, but you are no longer imprisoned by them. You are no longer a hostage of the linear equation. You are free, and that freedom, that paradoxical freedom to have joy without having everything, is precisely what allows you to persevere when others give up. Can I be honest with you for a second? Not as a preacher, not as a content creator, but as someone who has been where you might be now. You are tired. Tired of trying, tired of praying the same prayers that seem to bounce off the ceiling, tired of keeping up appearances that everything is okay when, inside, you're questioning whether it's worth continuing in this faith. And the worst part, you feel guilty for being tired, because Christians shouldn't feel like that, right? Christians should have unspeakable joy. Christians should be more than conquerors. Christians should be radiant, hopeful, full of peace. But you're not. And this dissonance between what you should feel and what you actually feel is destroying you from the inside. Let me tell you what no one has told you. It's okay not to be okay. Paul was not well when he wrote those letters. He was literally chained. He had chronic health problems, thorns in the flesh. He had been abandoned by close friends. He knew he would be executed soon. But the difference is that Paul didn't pretend to be okay. He didn't post motivational verses hiding his real suffering. He was brutally honest. No one stood by me. Everyone abandoned me. True faith does not deny suffering, it transcends it. And you need to hear this today. You are not failing because you are suffering. You are being human. The problem isn't that you're tired. The problem is that you were taught that Christians don't get tired. You were taught that true faith means a constant smile and unwavering peace. But look at Jesus in Gethsemane, sweating blood, begging, if it is possible, take this cup from me. That's not a lack of faith. That's real faith, facing real suffering. Perhaps you're watching this video because you're going through something specific right now. Let me guess. Perhaps it's that illness that just won't go away. No matter how many times you've been anointed, no matter how many prayer chains have been held, or that marriage that's falling apart, and you both love Jesus, but it doesn't seem like that's enough to save the relationship. Or that child you raised in the church, for whom you prayed from the womb, whom you taught the ways of God, but who today rejects everything you believe in. Or that financial crisis that makes no sense because you tithe faithfully. You're honest, you work hard, but the money just doesn't appear. Or maybe it's something more subtle. Maybe it's just this growing feeling of emptiness. You do everything right to go to church, you read the Bible, you pray, but it seems like God is silent. And you start to wonder, isn't all this just a big illusion that I'm convincing myself to believe? If you identified with any of these situations, first, you are not alone. Second, you are not weak for feeling this way. What you're feeling has a name: spiritual cognitive dissonance. You were taught that faith leads to blessings. You have faith, but the blessings haven't come. So your brain short circuits, trying to reconcile what you believe with what you're experiencing. And do you know what the standard response the church gives you is? Have more faith. There must be hidden sin. You're not praying enough. These answers don't help. In fact, they make things worse. Because now, in addition to the original suffering, you also carry the guilt of believing that the suffering is your fault. But what if it isn't? What if the problem isn't your faith, but your theology? What if the problem isn't you, but what you've been taught about how God works? Can I tell you what you're afraid to admit, even to yourself? You're afraid that if you're radically honest, you'll discover you don't really believe in any of it. You're afraid that if you really look at the facts at how many prayers have gone unanswered, how much unjust suffering exists, how many good people suffer while bad people prosper, you'll conclude that God doesn't exist or doesn't care. And that's why you avoid thinking too much. You keep yourself busy with religious activities. You repeat mantras of faith. You watch Christian motivational videos. Anything to drown out that inner voice that whispers, "What if I'm wrong about all of this?" I understand that fear, because I've been there. Paul was there. All the great men and women of faith have been there. But here is what I learned, and what Paul learned, and what I want to offer you now. The path to true faith passes through honest doubt. You don't need to pretend everything is okay. You don't need to suppress your difficult questions. You don't need to be afraid to be honest with God about your frustration, your anger, your weariness. In fact, it's only when you stop pretending that you can find something real. Paul did not find joy in pretending that imprisonment was legal. He found joy in acknowledging that imprisonment was horrible, but that Christ was sufficient nonetheless. Do you see the difference? It's not toxic optimism. It's not forced positive thinking. It's brutal honesty with resilient faith. And that's what gives you a real connection with God. Not your pretty prayers. Not your declarations of faith. But your real tears. Your honest questions. Your authentic lament. So if you're tired, that's okay. If you're confused, that's okay. If you're questioning, that's okay. You don't need to have all the answers right now. You just need to be willing to take the journey from the law of linearity to the law of freedom. And I'm going to show you how. But first, I need to tell you something about Paul that will turn your theology upside down. Everything I've told you so far has prepared you for this moment. And what I'm about to reveal may completely change the way you see Christianity. Are you ready? Paul did not persevere because he had strong faith. Paul persevered because he changed the object of his faith. Wait, what? Let me explain, because this sounds heretical, but it's exactly the opposite. Most Christians have faith in faith. If I have enough faith, God will act. If I believe enough, the miracle will happen. Faith becomes the currency. The more faith you have, the more blessings you buy. But Paul discovered something radically different. It's not the size of your faith that matters, but the size of your God. Think about the last time you prayed about something important. How did you pray? It's probably something like this. God, I believe you can do this. I have faith that you will heal, provide, solve this for me. The entire emphasis is on your faith. You are trying to muster enough faith to convince God to act. But Paul prayed like this. Lord, 3 times I pleaded with you to remove this thorn from my flesh. And God answered, my grace is sufficient for you. Do you see the twist? God didn't remove the problem. God offered himself as the solution. Paul was not healed, but Paul found something better than healing. He found the sufficiency of Christ in weakness. And here's the plot twist no one told you. When you stop demanding that God change your circumstances, you are finally free to experience God within them. But there's more, because what I'm about to tell you will completely shatter the logic you use to understand faith. You think the goal of the Christian life is to receive blessings, but what if the goal of those blessings is to draw you to Christ? Let me explain with an example. You pray for financial provision. Why? To pay your bills, to have security, to live comfortably. Money is the goal, God is the means. But according to Paul's logic, you pray for financial provision to learn to trust God each day. Trust in God is the goal. Financial need is the means. See how the equation has been completely reversed. You pray for healing. Why? To avoid suffering, to live longer, to be healthy. Health is the goal. God is the means. But according to Paul's logic, you pray for healing to experience the sufficiency of God's grace in weakness. The sufficiency of Christ is the goal. Illness is the means. Now you might be thinking, wait, so are you saying that God doesn't want to bless me? That God doesn't care about my suffering? And here's the final twist. The most important one of all. God cares so much about you that he will not give you what you want, but what you need. What you need is not a life without problems. What you need is a God who is sufficient even with the problems. Because let me tell you a secret. If God gave you everything you asked for, you would never truly need him. You would use his blessings, but you wouldn't need his presence. That is precisely why so many prosperous and healthy people are spiritually miserable. They have everything they thought they needed to be happy, but they lack the one thing that truly fulfills intimacy with God. And now for the final bombshell. The truth that will reshape everything you think about faith. Jesus didn't die to give you a good life. Jesus died to be your life. Read it again, slowly. Let it sink in. The cross is not the means for you to achieve a happy life. The cross reveals that true life is in dying to yourself and living for Christ. Paul says, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. He doesn't say, Christ lives in me so that I may have a better life. He says, Christ lives in me, therefore I no longer need a better life. Have Christ. This is radically different from everything you've been taught, isn't it? And here are the explosive consequences of that truth. Consequence 1. You stop measuring God's faithfulness by your circumstances. God is not more faithful when you are doing well. God is not less faithful when you suffer. God's faithfulness is constant. What changes is your ability to perceive it. Consequence 2. You stop living on an emotional and spiritual roller. When things are going well, you don't become euphoric thinking that God loves you more. When things are going badly, you don't despair thinking that God has abandoned you. Consequence 3. You finally understand why. Paul could say, "Rejoice always," not because he had reasons for joy based on circumstances, but because the source of his joy was beyond circumstances. So here's the question you need to answer now. With all this new information, do you want a faith that only works when life is good? Or do you want a faith that works especially when life is difficult? Because if you choose the second option, Paul's option, I'm going to show you right now exactly how to make that transition. How to escape the prison of the law of linearity and enter the freedom of grace. How to stop bargaining with God and start resting in Him. How to have unwavering joy, not because you have everything, but because you have the one who is everything. Let's go. So we've reached the end of this journey, and I need to give you the answer I promised at the beginning. How do you persevere when everything falls apart? The answer is not be strong, it's not pray more, it's not have faith. The answer is give up your right to a good life and receive the good God. Paul did it. John did it. Peter did it. Every Christian who persevered to the end did it. They stopped bargaining with God. They stopped using Jesus as a means to obtain blessings. And they began to embrace Jesus as the prize itself. And when you do that, when you truly let go of your linear expectations and embrace the sufficiency of Christ, something supernatural happens. You experience joy even in prison, peace even in the storm, contentment even in loss. Not because you are superhuman, but because you finally stopped depending on human circumstances and began to rest in divine grace. Now you know the secret that kept Paul strong until the end. You know why he could smile in prison. You know why the threat of death didn't shake him. He had found something that could not be taken away. Christ in him, the hope of glory. Not Christ for him to obtain glory, Christ as glory. And this truth, this simple yet revolutionary truth, is what will transform your faith from fragile to unshakable. Will you continue praying for blessings? Yes. Will you continue wishing for things to get better? Of course. But you will no longer be imprisoned by those expectations. You will be free to live in peace, regardless of the outcome. That's true perseverance. That's faith that goes all the way. But now, I need to tell you something important, something I haven't revealed yet. Because it's one thing to understand this truth intellectually, it's quite another to live it in practice. How do you actually make that transition from the law of linearity to the law of liberty? How do you stop depending on circumstances for your happiness? How do you break free from years, perhaps decades of mental conditioning that taught you that happiness comes from having what you want? And here's what most people don't tell you. There's a practical process. There are concrete steps. There are spiritual practices that help you make this change. Paul didn't wake up one day enlightened with this truth. He went through a process of deconstruction and reconstruction, of dying to himself and living for Christ, of emptying himself of his ambitions and being filled with God's sufficiency. And this process, this practical path of escaping the mental prison of linear expectations and entering the freedom of grace, is something I've explored in depth in other videos here on the channel. For example, there's a specific video where I talk about how to deal with unanswered prayers without losing faith. Because it's one thing to intellectually accept that God may not give you what you want. It's quite another to emotionally process the frustration of years of prayers that seem to go unanswered. There's another video where I delve into how to develop supernatural contentment. How did Paul actually get to the point of saying, "I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am"? It wasn't magic. It was intentional practice. And there's a video that many people say has completely changed their perspective. How to differentiate true faith from religious positive thinking. Because the line is thin, and many are practicing optimism disguised as faith. So here's what I encourage you to do now. First, don't let this message be just another inspirational video that you watch and forget. Really, reflect on where you are living according to the law of linearity. Where you are bargaining with God, where you are using Jesus as a means instead of embracing him as an end. Second, explore the other videos on the channel that will give you practical tools to make this transition. Because information without application doesn't lead to transformation. Third, share this message with someone you know who is struggling, someone who is on the verge of giving up. Someone who needs to hear that the root of the problem is not a lack of faith, but flawed theology. And let me tell you one last thing before we finish. There's something Paul wrote in his last letter before he died. Something that sums up this whole journey. Something that, when you truly understand it, changes everything. He is in prison, chained, knowing that in days or weeks he will be beheaded. And he writes, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness. But here's what few people realize. Paul doesn't say, I have fought the good fight and won. He doesn't say, I have finished the race and attained my goals. He simply says, I've made it to the end. And that, my friend, is the true victory. Not achieving everything you dreamed of. Not living the perfect life. Not having all your prayers answered. But to reach the end still trusting, still loving, still faithful. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how Paul developed this spiritual resilience. How he trained his soul to remain faithful even when everything was falling apart. Because perseverance isn't talent, it's skill. And skills can be trained. Before you go, I need to ask you something. Actually, 3 things. First, if this message touched you in any way, made you think, gave you hope, or challenged you, leave a like on this video. It seems simple, but each like sends a signal to YouTube that this content is relevant. And when YouTube understands that the content is relevant, it shows it to more people. And at this very moment, there are thousands of people on the verge of giving up on their faith who need to hear this message. Your like could be the reason someone in despair finds this video at the right time.